The house was quieter than usual that evening, the kind of silence that presses against your ears and makes your thoughts louder than they should be. I had lived there for years, but ever since my father started working late nights, the place felt unfamiliar, like a hotel pretending to be a home. I was in the hallway, half distracted, replaying an argument I'd had earlier with myself, about life, about failure, about how stuck I felt while everyone else seemed to move forward. I didn't hear her footsteps. We turned the corner at the same time. It happened too fast to think, too sudden to avoid. I stumbled forward, instinctively reaching out to steady myself. She reached out too. Our balance collided before our minds could catch up. In that split second, confusion, surprise, breath held too long, our faces were too close. And then it happened, a brief accidental contact. Not planned, not wanted, not something my mind had ever imagined. I pulled back instantly, heart slamming against my ribs like it was trying to escape. My first thought wasn't fear, it was shame. I'm sorry, I said immediately, words tumbling over each other. That was an accident. I couldn't even finish the sentence. I expected anger, shock, a sharp step backward, but she didn't move. She just stood there, eyes wide, not furious, not calm either, something unreadable passing across her face. The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable, like it was testing how long it could survive between us. That was when I noticed it. She hadn't pulled away. Not immediately, not instinctively. That realization hit harder than the moment itself. I took another step back, putting distance where it should have always been. My voice felt smaller when I spoke again. It won't happen again. I swear. She nodded slowly, finally breaking eye contact. Of course, she said. Her tone was controlled, almost too controlled. It was nothing. Just be careful. Nothing. But it didn't feel like nothing. As I walked away, my chest tight. One thought followed me down the hallway like a shadow I couldn't shake. Some moments end instantly. Others linger, quietly changing everything. And I didn't yet know which kind this was. Chapter 2. The Silence After. The house felt different the morning after. Like the walls themselves were holding their breath. I woke up early, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment I wished I could erase. It hadn't been planned. It hadn't been wanted. And yet it had happened. A second too long. A mistake that landed heavier than it should have. Downstairs, I could hear the soft clink of dishes. She was awake. I stayed in my room longer than usual, hoping time might fix what memory refused to let go. When I finally stepped into the hallway, we crossed paths near the kitchen doorway. Our eyes met for half a second, then both of us looked away. No anger, no explanation, just silence. She poured coffee slowly, her hands steady, her face calm, but something in her posture had changed. The warmth she usually carried was guarded now, careful, like she had drawn an invisible line and dared the world to cross it. I'm late today, she said, breaking the silence without looking at me. Okay, I replied. My voice sounded unfamiliar, like it didn't belong to me. That was it. No mention of the night before, no accusations, no comfort. Just two people pretending nothing had shifted, even though everything had. All day the moment followed me like a shadow. At work, on the bus, in the reflection of dark windows. I kept thinking she might bring it up later, that she'd demand an explanation, or set a boundary in words. But when evening came, she avoided me entirely. Dinner was quiet. She sat across the table, scrolling her phone, nodding occasionally, as if we were strangers sharing space out of obligation. That hurt more than anger would have. Because silence isn't forgiveness, it's distance. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something terrifying. The mistake wasn't just the moment. It was how easily it had changed everything without a single word. Some lines, once blurred, never fully return. Chapter 3. The distance that spoke louder than words. The house felt different the next morning. Not louder, not quieter, just heavier. I woke up before sunrise, staring at the ceiling like it might explain what my mind refused to process. The moment replayed in fragments, never clear, never complete, like a broken memory I didn't want to own. What scared me most wasn't what happened, but what didn't happen afterward. No shouting, no confrontation, no explanation, silence. At breakfast, she was already there. Same composed posture, same calm movements, same controlled expression. If I hadn't known better, I would have believed nothing was wrong. but her eyes never met mine, not once. She focused on her coffee, the newspaper, the ticking clock on the wall. That avoidance said everything. I sat across from her, hands clenched under the table, my heart racing for no visible reason. I wanted to speak, to apologize, to say something, anything, but every sentence collapsed before reaching my mouth. Some things, once acknowledged, can't be taken back. She stood up quietly, took her cup, and walked away. No anger, no softness, just distance. And distance hurts more than words. The rest of the day passed like a blur. I left the house early and walked aimlessly through the city. Crowds surrounded me, but I felt completely alone. I realized then that mistakes don't always explode. Sometimes they slowly erase comfort, safety, and familiarity. That night I made a decision, not because I was brave, but because I was scared of becoming someone I didn't recognize. Some lines once crossed must be rebuilt with distance, and some silences are warnings, not invitations. I stayed in my room, door closed, lights off, letting the quiet teach me what I needed to learn. Because regret isn't loud, it's patient. Chapter 4. The Line I Couldn't Unsee. By Christmas morning, the house felt smaller than ever. Not because of walls, but because of silence. We moved around each other like strangers, who shared memories neither wanted to name. Every glance carried weight. Every pause said more than words ever could. What happened that night was never repeated aloud, but it lived between us. At breakfast, she kept herself busy, pouring coffee, straightening plates that didn't need fixing. I noticed her hands trembling, just slightly. Not fear, not guilt. Something closer to regret. I realized then that the moment hadn't changed, just me. It had shaken her too. Later that afternoon, I stepped outside, the cold air grounding my thoughts. Snow fell softly as if the world was trying to quiet my mind. I understood something important in that stillness. Some moments don't need to be explained to be dangerous. They only need to be acknowledged. I wasn't angry. I wasn't confused anymore. I was aware, and awareness changes everything. When I returned inside, we finally spoke. Not about that moment, but about boundaries, about respect, about the fragile trust holding our family together. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It was necessary. That night, lying awake, I knew one truth clearly. Some lines once seen can never be unseen, and growing up sometimes means choosing distance over denial. Chapter 5. The Distance Between Us. By the 5th day after everything changed, the house felt bigger and emptier. Not because people were gone, but because silence had taken over. The kind of silence that presses against your ears and makes your thoughts louder than they should be. I avoided her. Not intentionally at first. It just happened. Breakfast times shifted. Hallway paths no longer crossed. If I entered a room, she found a reason to leave. And yet somehow, I could still feel her presence, like an unfinished sentence hanging in the air. I told myself this was the right thing to do. Distance meant safety. Distance meant control. Distance meant nothing else could go wrong. But distance also meant questions. Why hadn't she pulled away that night? Why hadn't she said anything since? Why did it feel like she was carrying the same weight I was? That evening, rain tapped softly against the windows. The house lights were dim, casting long shadows along the walls. I sat alone on the couch, scrolling mindlessly on my phone, not really seeing anything. Then I heard her voice. "Can we talk?" Just 4 words, but they landed heavier than anything else that week. She stood a few steps away, arms folded loosely, not defensive. Just unsure. Her expression wasn't angry. It wasn't cold. It was tired, and that scared me more than anything. I nodded. She didn't sit beside me. She chose the chair across the room, keeping a careful distance, as if she was drawing a line neither of us should cross again. "That night," she said quietly, eyes fixed on the floor, "shouldn't define us." I swallowed. "I know," I replied. A pause stretched between us. "But pretending it never happened won't help either," she continued. We both froze. That's human. What matters is what we do after. Her words were calm, controlled, mature. And suddenly I understood something important. She wasn't confused about her role. She wasn't lost. She was protecting boundaries for both of us. "I don't want this house to feel uncomfortable," she said. "I don't want you carrying guilt that doesn't belong to you." I looked up at her then, really looked. There was no manipulation in her eyes, no hidden intent, only responsibility. "I'll keep my distance," I said. "If that's what you want." She finally met my gaze. "I want peace," she answered. "And respect. For you, for me." That night didn't erase what happened, but it redefined it. It wasn't a secret anymore. It wasn't a threat. It was a moment, acknowledged, contained, and put where it belonged, in the past. As she stood to leave, she paused at the doorway. "You're stronger than you think," she said softly. Then she was gone. And for the first time since that night, I could breathe. Chapter 6: The Weight of Silence. The house felt smaller than ever. Every room carried echoes of what had happened, not in images, but in unspoken tension. No one mentioned that night, yet it existed between us like a crack in the walls. Invisible but impossible to ignore. I avoided eye contact. She avoided conversation. Days passed, then weeks. At dinner, words were polite but hollow. The clinking of utensils sounded louder than voices. My mind replayed questions I never dared ask. Was it really an accident? Did silence mean regret or something worse? What haunted me most wasn't the moment itself. It was what came after. Silence. No apology. No explanation. No acknowledgement. That silence forced me to grow up faster than I was ready for. I realized something painful. Not every mistake comes with closure. Some moments stay unfinished, teaching lessons through discomfort instead of answers. So I chose distance, not anger, not blame. Distance for survival. I poured myself into work, into long walks, into nights where music replaced conversation. Slowly, the weight eased, not because it disappeared, but because I learned to carry it. Some lines, once crossed, even unintentionally, can never be redrawn. But they can teach you where you stand. And for the first time, I understood. Maturity isn't about confronting everything. It's about knowing when to step away. Chapter 7: The Line I Never Crossed Again. The house felt different now. Not quieter, clearer. For days after that night, I avoided common spaces. Not out of fear, but because I needed distance to understand what had really happened. What stayed with me wasn't the moment itself. It was the realization that some lines, once blurred, can change everything forever. She avoided me too. Not in guilt. In respect. One evening, she finally spoke. Her voice was steady. Controlled. Nothing like the confusion that once filled the room. "What happened should never define you," she said. "And it won't happen again." No apologies. No excuses. Just finality. That was enough. I understood then that growth doesn't always come from confrontation. It comes from walking away without drama. From choosing self-control when chaos offers temptation. Weeks passed. I focused on my future, work, independence, silence that healed instead of hurt. The memory slowly lost its power. Not erased, but contained. On the day I moved out, she stood at the door. No words. No tension. Just a nod. I stepped into the sunlight knowing one truth. Some mistakes teach you who you are. Some moments test your limits. But real strength is knowing when to let go and never look back. That chapter of my life closed. Not with regret, but with clarity. And for the first time I felt free.